Hello and welcome back to Introduction to Programming in Python. This is our fourth video and we're going to finish up our discussion of primitive data types with strings. In the last two videos we talked about numbers and how they could be stored as integers or floats, and we talked about booleans and how they can control the logic of our program. We're going to, in this video, talk about strings and how we can get user input and convert strings to these other data types to have some more interesting program features. So we've seen strings before, especially when we printed hello world to the screen. In that example, we used double quotes and we wrote hello world to represent some English text that we wanted to print. We can also use single quotes or even triple quotes in Python to represent these types of strings, and there isn't really much of a difference between these. Now inside strings, we might also want to put new line characters or tabs or things that are not easy to type. And to do these things, we're going to use the backslash character escape sequence. So \n gives us a new line, \t gives us a tab, and \\/ actually types a regular backslash. This is important because we're going to see later how we might want to format text on the fly, and we need to be able to type a new line character without actually making a new line of code. The tabs in particular are interesting because we might want to print out a table and have everything left justified, and tabs let us do that very nicely. Now, we had operators with numbers, like plus and minus, we had operators with booleans, like and or, and of course we have string operators as well. The most common one is concatenation. That takes two strings and just places them next together as a third string. So in this case, I'm going to print out hello Justin by concatenating the hello string with the Justin string into one string that's just the two of them stitched together. Python lets us do repetition with the multiplication symbol or the star, and we can, repeat ha 6 times to have some longer laughter. Length is important. We can use the length command, len, and put a string inside those parentheses to get the number of characters present in the string. So in this example, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious has 34 letters, and we learn that by printing out the length of that word. That leads us into slices. Slices let us take out individual characters from a string, but it's important to note that the first character is not actually index 1. When we take a slice, we're going to use square brackets and select the index of the character we like. But the first character is actually index 0. I'm going to try really hard in these videos not to use phrases like first, because first makes you think index 1 when I mean index 0. So the character at index 0 is P, the character at index 3 is H. If we want to get more than one characters, we can use the range slice. This uses a 1 to 4, which would be 1:4 type expression inside your brackets. And it's important to note that although we're going to get the first index listed, we're going to go up but not include the last index listed. So for example, word bracket 1:4 is actually going to get characters 1, 2, and 3, not including 4. If we want to get everything from the second character onward, we just don't need to include the last digit. Instead, we can write word 2: and not supply that last number. Similarly, we could get from the beginning up to a certain character by not supplying the first value. And all of this is important because when we want to get input from a person, we're going to need to get it as a string. And we use the input function to, non-surprisingly, get input. But unfortunately, we cannot do conversions between strings and numbers without telling the computer a little bit more first. So this example doesn't work because the age variable stores a string and we're comparing it against an integer. And that doesn't make any sense because the computer doesn't know if that's the number 22 or if that's the word apples, or if it was even worse, we were comparing a boolean to a number. That just doesn't make any sense. We can only make comparisons between similar types. So in this case, we have to tell the computer to treat the age variable as an integer, and we're going to compare age as an integer to the number 18 to determine whether or not our user is an adult. We also can cast to float or string using similar functions. So without further ado, we're going to look at a programming example where we play around with these types of concepts, and we're going to extend the program that we did in our previous video. In the last video, our code required us to type in a person's information in the top of the program here. We would press F5 and their information or their greeting would pop up in this console. But we don't want to have to change our program, save our program, and run our program every time we get a new user. Instead, we want to ask users for their information and let them supply it to us. And this is actually pretty straightforward. We're going to put input, and we're going to ask them, what is your name? For age, we're just going to make sure that we cast it to an integer after we get the input. So we're going to say int input, and then just ask them for their age. So to clarify, the input command is going to get a string from the console, and then whatever this string is going to be sent to the integer command, and then the result of that is going to be stored in age. Next, we want to figure out whether or not they've shopped before, and this one is a little bit harder because we're not going to ask them to type in true or false, we're going to ask them to type in yes or no. So we're going to get that from the console first, and we're going to ask them yes or no. Now, we don't really care too much about what they type in, but we do care whether or not the first character is a Y or N. And this is how we're going to express that. So the shopped before variable is first going to store the string input that the user types in from our question. Then we're going to compare the first character of that input to the capital letter Y. If the string input's first character is actually the capital letter Y, then this statement will evaluate as true, and we're going to put it in the shopped before variable. The code here looks a little confusing because of a single equal sign here and a double equal sign there. I'm going to make it look a little better. We can put parentheses around here to kind of group that logically. This doesn't change the code at all as far as the computer's concerned, but it makes it a little easier for a human being to see. And in an actual application, we definitely want to do more checks to make sure that if you didn't say yes, you meant no. But for our purposes, saying not yes is definitely a no. And lastly, we're going to ask them their income. This is exactly the same as asking them their age from before. Now let's see how this works. I'm going to press F5 and save that, and we see we're asked our name. Well, I'm Justin. My age is 22.ss. I have shopped here before, and I've got a poor grad student salary. I'm told welcome back because I have shopped here before, and I'm told can you get me anything because my income is pretty low. If I were to run this again, we're asked what is your name, and I might be someone else. I might be Bob. Bob is young. Bob has not shopped here before, and Bob doesn't make any money. And he's told children must be supervised because he's not old enough. And in this manner, we don't need to actually change our code to handle different users. It's definitely annoying to still have to rerun our program each time we get a new user, and in the next video, we're going to see how we can use loops and other sorts of control structures to handle some of that for us. Anyways, that's all I have for us now. Thank you for listening, and I hope I've been helpful.